Have you ever wondered what the difference between developmental editing and line editing is? Well, in this video, I'm going to break it down what happens in each of those phases of editing and what you need to know for your book. Hi, I'm Charlotte Chipperfield. I'm your book coach and developmental editor. I help women authors unapologetically write, edit, and publish books that inspire and create impact. Before we dive into today's editing topic, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a thing. So there are many different types of editing and different professional editors that work in most spaces. So the first is developmental editing. The second is line editing. The third is copy editing, which most people have heard of and is often what they think of when they hear the word editing. This is where you're looking at your spelling, your grammar, looking for typos. And then, of course, there's proofreading, which is that final set of eyes looking at your book, making sure there are no typos and that everything looks clean and tidy. For the purposes of this video, we're going to focus both on the developmental editing and the line editing and talk about what each of those are and when you would engage with that type of editing. I know that when I first started writing, I had no idea there were different kinds of editors. I thought an editor was an editor, but there are very different types of editors. They focus in different areas. And all of these phases are really important when you are writing your own book. And there might be opportunities where you can do some of that editing yourself. And then there's other times where we want to make sure that we're inviting in professionals at the right time so that we can really bring forward the best possible book and the best possible experience for the readers. So editing is such an essential step in your publishing path because this is really making sure that everything that you had in your head is landing on paper and is consumable and relatable for the readers. They really understand the information you're presenting. If you're presenting or writing nonfiction or even in fiction, we're feeling connected to these characters. And there's no sort of plot holes or questions left unanswered at the end of your book. So two of the most critical steps and the first two steps on your editing journey is first developmental editing, then you'll move into the line editing stage. So both of these are really serving to refine your manuscript. So let's distinguish the two and get a better understanding of when you should be engaging with each level of editing. So the first is developmental editing. So this is really looking at the 10,000-foot view of the structure of your book. So this is looking at, did you make a promise to your readers and did you truly deliver on it? So I am a developmental editor. I am trained in this. I am certified in this. And what I really look for are the key areas in which the book can be elevated to really meet that reader expectation. So when I'm reading a manuscript, I'm looking at the overall structure of the book. Is there a beginning, a middle, and an end? Is everything logically flow together? Are there any plot holes if you're writing fiction or in nonfiction? Did you go off on so many tangents that the reader's like, I don't actually know why I picked up this book? So it's really making sure, again, that your ideas got organized in a way that is consumable for other people. This is also where pacing is taken into consideration, so making sure that there's not so much information in a chapter that things are moving so fast, and then there's like 3 chapters that move really slow, and then some that move really fast, and it gets confusing. So again, it's about having a nice rhythm throughout your entire book, even if there are times where things speed up and there's more action, and other times where it's a little bit slower. But you want all of that to feel very natural and not forced. So developmental editing is also looking at your plot if you're writing fiction. So this is making sure that you've hit all of the marks. And again, depending on what genre you're in, romance is going to be a little bit different than thriller, but there's certain reader expectations and certain things that we want to have happen. For example, in a thriller, having a twist that happens in your book is a big expectation of that genre. So we want to make sure that you've been able to breadcrumb a lot of the clues along the way, and then you're able to still surprise and delight the reader towards the end of the book. For nonfiction, you're looking at that structure again, that organization and the clarity of the ideas that you are putting forth in front of the reader. Another aspect of the developmental editing process is making sure that your setting is coming through, that that's very clear, that the readers are very grounded into the space and time of when your story is taking place. Developmental editing also looks at your dialogue. Like, does it make sense? Is it clear? Is it flowing? Are there opportunities to add more action into the dialogue? Is it, too much dialogue? Like, there's all of those elements that come into the dialogue, making sure it's balanced, that it's natural, that there's movement within it, that there's purpose behind the dialogue. Dialogue should always be moving the story forward, and this is also one of the areas where you can kind of take a step back and look at, hey, does this dialogue really serve the purpose I intended in the developmental edit stage? And developmental editing also looks a lot at the point of view. So I've made another video on point of view before, but we've talked about how to avoid head hopping. So this is changing points of view throughout your book. And again, lots of writers make this mistake, especially if it's your first book. It's very easy to accidentally jump into the head of another character. And so we're just looking for those points of views consistency. Same with if you're writing nonfiction, you might start off talking to the reader. So you might be telling them that you can experience these 5 steps in order to achieve what you'd like to achieve. But then maybe you switch it and you're talking only about your personal story. So again, keeping that point of view consistent throughout the book is going to also elevate that reader experience and avoid any confusion or make them put the book down altogether. We don't want that. This is really about making sure that you give the best experience so that you can really inspire your readers and have that impact in the world you want to have. So developmental editing is really that first step of editing once you have a finished manuscript. And it doesn't have to be fully perfect. You can still be working some things out, but developmental editing is your first step once you have a completed manuscript, because this is where you're really looking at the structure of events that are happening, your plot. This is where big chunks of your text might be moved around, especially in nonfiction. I've worked with so many authors where, chapter 8 becomes chapter 2 and chapter 5 becomes chapter 10. And so again, you're looking for that logic, that organization, and that clarity. And so this is why you don't want to just dive into the spelling and grammar and typos, because if you're going to start moving big text around, moving chapters around, maybe changing certain characters in nonfiction. Sometimes we have supporting characters that kind of fizzle out or just disappear and we didn't intend for that to happen. Or we end up renaming a character halfway through the book. So there's all these things where you might have to go back and make some bigger structural changes. So that's why it's really important that this happens first. It again sets that foundation for your manuscript. So as you move forward into those next phases of editing, then you don't have to worry about big chunks of text being moved around. It's all set and it's really foundationally set in your manuscript, so then it can move down the rest of the funnel of editing so it can be as polished and refined as you need it to be. So overall, developmental editing is really taking that 10,000-foot view, looking at the full structure of that reader experience and making sure that their expectations are going to be met and that there are no lingering things like plot holes or structure or clarity that doesn't make sense for the reader. So this is such a foundational part of the book writing process and the book publishing process. I often talk about this being where you have like a 1,000-piece puzzle and you just like dumped the box on the table, and I understand it can feel very overwhelming. But ultimately, this is about making sure all of those pieces are in the right place that are really going to resonate with your readers. This is something that I absolutely love to do. This is why I'm a developmental editor. I can see the big picture and I know it needs to move and shift and change. I love being able to like bring it together in such a powerful way, both for the author and for the reader. So if you want to learn more about working with me as a developmental editor, I've left a link below. So let's talk about line editing. Line editing is the next stage on the editing process. So once you've completed your developmental edit, everything is in place, it feels good, you've got those key areas that are elevated. This is when you can then move to the line editing part. This is also a really fun part of the editing process because you really get to look at your sentence structure. You get to think about, hey, could I say this differently? Or is there a better way to say this? Or what words could I change in the sentence to have more impact? So line editing is a very detailed stylistic edit. So this is literally taking it sentence by sentence and seeing if anything needs to be changed. So this is being able to look at your sentences and ask, is there a better way to say this? Am I being clear enough? Do I want to use that word? This is where you kind of really make sure that your ideas are clear and crisp. This is where you get to enhance that readability. You also get to enhance the pacing and just the overall flow of the book. And this is also where you get to polish some of your language without altering the whole structure of the book, because you've already done that. This is really just looking about, am I saying what I need to say? Is there a better way of saying this? And it just gives you an opportunity to ensure that each sentence has the impact that you want it to have. So a line editor is going to focus on that sentence clarity and structure, your word choice and your tone. You're going to look for any repetitive sentences or words. This is very common too. If you've ever gone Control F and looked for certain words in your manuscript, you might find that you've used, he was hungry, like 20 times or 90 times. And so there's different ways that you can find those words. I think most authors know which ones they've overused because you get a sense of that when you're writing it. And you can go and find some of those and look for other ways to say that, even if it's still the same meaning. This is also where you get to refine any awkward phrasing. So if you read your manuscript out loud, this can be one of the best ways to see and understand if you are, stumbling over your words or it's not making sense. This is a great way to see what needs to be refined further so that there is a really strong flow to your sentence and nothing is awkward or going to trip people up. This is also where you can read your dialogue out loud. And so again, thinking about, hey, is this awkward? And I didn't intend it to be awkward. How can you refine the dialogue so it can be really authentic to your characters, but also, again, reveal something or put in more action so that that's coming through really strong for your readers. So line editing is also going to help you with transitions and your rhythm within your writing. It's also going to help you stay consistent in your style and your voice. So unlike developmental editing, the line editing is going to focus on that sentence by sentence structure without looking at the overall structure of your book. So this is really an opportunity to hone the language you're using to make sure the flow, the rhythm, your voice, your tone, all of that is coming through in the way that you wanted. So you can see how if you skip developmental editing, jump straight into the line editing, you start to refine at the sentence level, and then you realize, oh no, there's some structural issues that I need to move around in my book. How some of that work you've done on the line editing can then not translate once it's been moved because there's sort of that disconnector that's going to break up that flow and that rhythm that you've been trying to create. So this is why it's really important to start with that developmental edit before moving into the line editing. And then of course, once you've done the line editing, you can go into the copy editing and the proofreading just to continue to refine for your spelling, your grammar, and typos. So if you have a completed manuscript and you're looking to get feedback or to shape your story, really refine your arguments, you want to start with that developmental edit. Developmental editing is where you really make sure that your story is landing how you wanted it to land, that it makes sense for the reader. And this is really important to do that before you move into the line editing, where again, you can establish your tone, your rhythm, your pacing. You can enhance that dialogue so it's as natural as possible. So depending on your strengths and weaknesses as a writer, sometimes it's really easy to see the big picture fixes that you need to make. Or maybe you're really good at being able to analyze sentences and change out words and make sure your tone and what you intended that sentence to say lands in the way that you wanted. So sometimes there's opportunity for you to do this for yourself. And then of course, there's plenty of professionals out there to help and support you as well. Again, I am a developmental editor here to help you make sure your book is refined and as strong as it possibly can be from a structural standpoint. Again, you can learn more below in the link. I'm here to help you shape your stories to have the most inspiration and impact they can in the world. And so if you like this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.